Wes Tolhurst, thank you for joining us here on the Game Channel and the Digital Missionaries. They might have already seen you if they watched a video from last week or the week before. We actually shared a sermon that you recently took at a creative conference. And yeah, I'm sure they'd be blessed by that. And I wanted to chat with you, Wes, about your journey, about the things that God's been doing in your life, and the kinds of ministry that you've been involved in. So thanks for that. Tell us, maybe start by telling us, how old you are. And
really?
Yeah. How old you are?
Age where you kind of asked that question, Kyle. But yeah, 48 and been on a really awesome journey that we've had some great times, and the viewers may not know this, but Kyle, you were one of the teenagers in our youth group when I came to my last church that I pastored on the Gold Coast in Australia. So yeah, it's been awesome.
So Wes is definitely one of the younger 48-year-olds that I know. You'll see he's got his cool hat on and he's wearing a casual t-shirt. I at least tried to put a collar on for this interview. So I've got this collar and you don't, but that's all right. No judgment here. So maybe Wes, let's talk a little bit. So the reason obviously I'm talking with you is because you have a specific journey as it relates to, I want to talk about this concept of total member involvement. Every member a minister is a line, I think, from Spirit of Prophecy that comes up fairly regularly. And ultimately, in the church, in God's church, as church members, we need to be contributing to that church. We all have a role to play. We're all a piece of that body. And so let's have a quick recap of your, career or your ministry, your calling, where that all started for you and where that's currently led.
I was really lucky to grow up in a God-honouring home and have great role models as parents who spent their life in ministry of different sorts. And so yeah, I feel really blessed and had a good bunch of friends who supported each other through the journey of growing up. And in year 12, I read The Great Controversy, and that really cemented for me the importance of time, the importance of this short life that we have, and that I wanted to make a difference for eternity, not just something that was going to be temporary. So for me at that time, I knew God was calling me into pastoral ministry. I had an idea that God wanted me to do something else until reading The Great Controversy, and that set me on the course of doing a theology degree at Avondale, and I finished in the States at Southwestern. Had a fantastic time doing that. Started pastoring in South New Zealand, other side of the world again, and a few years there, and then I went fairly soon into youth ministry, being a youth director in a couple of conferences, and then about the stage where we were ready to have a family, my wife Melissa and I, we went back to the local church scene and pastored Coast Life, which is where we met you, Kyle, and I was pastor there for 11 years. The last probably 3 of those years, I felt God knocking on my head, saying, "We've got something that I'd like you to do," and it was recalling a message that he gave me when I was 21 or 22. A calling that God gave me at that time to be involved in media, and I kind of misunderstood what he was saying to me at the time. But God's timing is always perfect. I was I guess not ready for that information at the time, and when the fullness of time had happened in my life, it was time for him to sort of wake me up in a new path of ministry. And
I'll just pause you there, Wes. How many years of local church pastoral ministry?
20,
20?
but that included 7 in the youth departments of local colleges. Yeah.
Did you ever feel called to like climb the ladder? Even it's not a ladder for everybody, but did you ever feel like you would want to go onto the union or to a division level? Or
I never felt ambitious in that regard, and that's probably I don't know many that are climbing the ladder that actually are ambitious. I think if you are ambitious, you don't get far in ministry. But no, I never really had a great desire to do that. My dad was an administrator and a leader and all the different levels of the church. So that gave me a really privileged, I guess, perspective and exposure to all the different levels of the church organisation, and a real appreciation for the people that work in their various different roles and the pressures that come to bear on them. So I guess none of that was a great mystery to me or held any great allure for me. That's not to say that I was opposed to it or anything, but I was
safe to say that you are heavily entrenched. Your routine, your security, your safety was definitely knowing that you would have money in your bank every fortnight from the church because you were a career minister, one would say.
Yeah, at least 5th generation pastor. I was very deeply entrenched, and certainly when I accepted the call to become a pastor, felt that it was a lifelong calling. I never saw myself doing anything different. And so it was a great surprise to me, and perhaps why I was a little bit dull in hearing the voice of God to take this life-altering course. And I guess I can understand why for many people it's misunderstood, as well as being I've left ministry, or I might have had some crisis of faith and that kind of thing. Yeah.
And so, I guess the other question I had there, in your sermon, you talked about the fact that you were actually behind the camera at a general conference session, and you heard God say that, he wanted to use you in some sort of a media capacity or in some sort of a role like that. Did that come before or after you felt the calling to local church ministry?
It came after. And so, I guess I was a little slow to really understand what that meant. I thought it meant God wanted me to be in front of the camera speaking, as a pastor is known to do, in front of the cameras, in front of the masses. But I really didn't see myself in the people that I was filming, and they were doing a wonderful job and all of that. But I just really didn't see myself as doing that, so I didn't understand. And still, when 5 years ago, we finally took this, what for us was a bigger step of faith, going into starting our own business and leaving, paid church employment. Then that was a bigger step than going into ministry in the first place for us, because, well, it took a lot more faith in the eyes of many people. It was a lot more stupid decision.
Let's talk about that journey for a little bit. So you're at Coast Life Church for 11 years. With your wife's family was part of that church. You had some of the most awesome members in the world, like myself, there at that church.
Sure, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, 5th generation minister, you had felt that calling for a few years, but maybe just tell us a little bit about what one has to do when they walk away from this perceived. So I guess I'm struggling with my words here a little bit because I've got my own journey, much smaller than your journey, but similar to your journey in that I was working in a local church and at a conference level for a number of years and felt a calling to step away from that. So for me, there's no, it's not that I didn't like the church or didn't like the opportunity that I had to serve God in that capacity, but yeah, for me, I felt like I had to do something different in ministry. And knowing what other people think of that, that really affected me. So tell us how that worked for you. How did you process that? What was that journey like?
Well, I guess in a lot of ways, I'd lived inside the Adventist bubble. I had more Adventist friends than non-Adventist friends. I grew up seeing the church's work and loving what the church was doing. Yeah. So when I was even entertaining the idea of stepping away from that, I had to confront my own views of what that would mean for me. Was I really having a crisis of faith? Because I'd seen other guys who had done that, and I myself had thought, well, I need to find an opportunity to get alongside those guys and see what I can do to bring them back into the ministry. See what I can, if I can talk them around. And then I guess I was confronted with my own naivety and narrow view that one form of ministry would be higher than any other. And I guess we, in the Adventist Church, we pay for certain roles of ministry, and there's a lot of other support staff towards that, and we pay for teaching and nursing and some of the well-established pathways of doing ministry of sorts. But yeah, I had a lot of learning to do, and understanding how great the role of faith is for everyday people who need to think about supporting their families and doing a job and work that might bring them to the weekend feeling completely exhausted, and then have a pastor like me stand up in front of them and say, you need to be volunteering more, you need to be serving more and ministering more. And here I was on the other side of the fence going, how do these members do it? It's amazing. It gave me a newfound appreciation of what it takes to be a regular member that is fully, I mean, you think about it, the men and women that lead our Pathfinder clubs, how much of their lives they sacrifice to do this, or our youth leaders in local churches, the people that turn up every Sabbath morning at church and set up all of the sound and the band and all that kind of stuff, and the people who are doing all of the various community ministries for free. It really woke me up to what God was doing among a lot of people that I really hadn't seen well enough before.
So Wes, let me throw a line at you that has been asked of me a few times, and it's slightly triggering for me, and I just want to see what goes through your head when you hear it. When somebody says, oh, so you're not in ministry anymore. You've left the ministry, have you?
Yeah, I used to actually get angry inside, put on the smile that I'd learned to do for 20 years when asked a difficult question by somebody. But yeah, and again, I've got to remember how narrow my view was for a long time. So I can understand. And usually this is what happens. Someone will say that, and then almost instantly they realize what they've said and start apologizing, and That's okay. To be honest, we're all on our own journey, and I still have so much to learn about treating people with the respect they deserve. And um, but it is a little confronting now. Now that I've joined the mass ranks of people who are already doing ministry for free, you know, yeah. So maybe I feel a little bit put off for them, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I guess I guess the fear that I felt, the fear that you likely felt, putting your family through, stepping out, walking this plank and stepping out of the comfort of a secure salary into not just ministry where you've got another job and you volunteer for the church on the side, but a job where you specifically, intentionally are trying to assist the church with media ministry in your own capacity in running a business and not being reliant upon a secure contract from the church official. I guess the fear that we felt in stepping away from that secure employment is a reflection of the fact that, yeah, we didn't understand that idea, that concept of, okay, so I'm not in ministry anymore, and the fear that brought up in ourselves. And so, yeah, I like the fact that that anger is actually a reflection of your understanding as well, not just other people's. So,
And I will use every opportunity that I can to articulate what we are doing as ministry, 100%. In fact, a lot of people still call me pastor, and if that can help people to, a lot of the films that we make now are seeking to tell people's authentic stories, and I find that my experience in working as a pastor really aids in helping people to have permission to be vulnerable and tell their honest stories on camera. And if they can do that, then what a gift that is to anyone who might see it. It's a privilege for us to listen and understand someone's story.
Let's back it up a bit then. When you left ministry, when you left the paid, secured comfort of employment, what kind of a ministry were you pursuing, and what have you dove into? What did you dive into?
So the initial calling that I felt compelled to answer was to take on the David Attenborough genre of film, making nature films that point the glory back to God. David Attenborough can only say, "Isn't this marvelous? Isn't this beautiful?" But he's got to stop there. He can't say anything about what reason there might be that it's there, or why is it beautiful, or that it might have a purpose. So he's missing a whole half of the beauty of it. And I felt compelled. Why isn't someone doing something about this? Until I realized perhaps God was asking me to do something about it. And I have, I guess, a unique set of skills in the background and experiences through my journey with the natural world and with photography that gave me a little bit of a unique equipping beforehand. And so that's what we went into. A friend of mine, Kyle Portbury, is an amazing Adventist filmmaker and a long way further down the road than I am, said, you gotta give up expecting that this film you're working on or planning towards is going to be done by this date, and then it'll be out there. He said film just has a time frame of its own. When the story's time has come, it will happen. And I feel like that's kind of been my story as well, because we are 5 years into our business, our ministry, Tolhurst Creative, and still haven't made any films that will take David Attenborough on. Now, is that God's planned for the future? I think so, but he has every right to change my mind on that. For the meantime, we've been making all sorts of films all over the world for God and the church, and had a great time doing that. And you know what is crazy about this industry is that you can charge clients to experiment and learn how to make films for God. Like, you can make TV advertisements and try stuff you haven't done before, and people will pay you for it. And then you learn about it, and you get better every time, and you take on projects that scare you, and then you learn from that. And ultimately it enables a guy like me to be a better filmmaker for the projects that I really care about, the ones that I do for God and for the church.
Let's talk about, you said you take on something that scares you. I've found for myself, for example, I had this podcast idea, but I had to overcome the fear of the fact that what if people don't like what I'm talking about? What if people don't like my voice? What if people think the content's silly? What if nobody listens to it? And I feel like all creatives struggle with this fear of presenting their creative work. And so for you, going into filmmaking, not having charged for a film before, your background being more photography and fishing, as far as I know, you took me out fishing, you're good at fishing, you got some trophies, and you took some photos and you got some trophies for some photos. And why should you be a filmmaker? Why would you take that on? And how do you overcome that fear?
Well, here's the great advantage I feel that Christian missionaries in whatever genre God's called us to do have over the rest of the world, is that we can get caught up in the whole fear thing, which comes from the comparison game. There's like, oh, look what they're doing. That's amazing. I could never do that. And comparing ourselves to other people. And it's the same in the Christian walk too. And well, we might be going well with God, but oh wow, I'm not as good as that person. They're so holy, they're so strict. They pray such beautiful prayers. But as soon as we're doing that, we're taking our eyes off God. Now, in the creative realm, to be anything other than completely focused on the story that's being told is to get distracted and end up doing a lesser job, and then it is mediocre. But I feel like when God just gives us full conviction that this is what he wants us to do, then it's so liberating. Because, and I would find this in pastoral ministry as well, I'm actually a very shy person. I'm glad it's only just you and I having a chat today, Kyle. Really quite a shy person, but when I turned up to a church event, God would just put this cloak of confidence on you to go and do his work. But to turn up to a maybe just a party for fun, like a birthday party full of people that you don't know, well, that was a really scary thing until you, hang on, God's wanting me to do something here. And I know he just gives you confidence to do the thing that he is enabling you and calling you to do, whatever that is. And that is different for everybody. Praise the Lord for that.
Yeah, and I think it's just like one of the reasons I really wanted to chat to you, Wes, was because I too feel convicted that the church is very short of media experts. The few experts in media that we do have, all of the ones that I know about are very busy. They're very busy people because there's so much to be done. There's not necessarily a lot of funding available, unfortunately, but they're very busy still. And so I think it's great that you've felt that conviction and acted on it rather than allowing fear to keep you confined to the box of ministry that you were previously found yourself in, that you were willing to jump out of that box and try something different. how do you think, how would you talk to somebody else who feels stuck, feels scared, feels like they can't do what they feel God has called them to do, or yeah, they feel an itch to quit their job and pursue some sort of ministry, but how do you make those first steps?
Well, I feel like the calling of God is not a comfortable thing. It's comfortable to stay where we are, even when we're, not satisfied or feel that something's not right. But the great thing is that he calls, I believe he calls us to work in the areas that he has made us already passionate about. He's not calling me to go and write policy. Praise the Lord, because I would be terrible at it, and that's not something that I believe God would ask me to do. He's asked me to take pictures and tell people stories, and that really that fires me up. I just could do that all day long, every day, and love it. So to be in that uncomfortable place, I was there for about 3 years, and it just grew stronger and stronger to the point where it was unbearable. Kyle, I couldn't sit still any longer. And I did love the job I was doing in the local church. And I loved the people. We didn't have any, great disasters that caused me to say, I've had enough, I've had it, but there was this really unsettling sort of emotion or mood in me that it was time. It was time to wake up, a part of me that had been asleep for a long time, and get that going. And I just couldn't sit still about that any longer. So when the time was right, we made a move. But I understand it does take faith, and it does take the faith of not just yourself, but whatever family you have with you. And that is a scary thing, undoubtedly. And sometimes, for me, it was something that both my parents really struggled with as well. And I guess I had to be grown up enough to make that call and follow my true leader, which is Christ, calling me on in spite of the reality that I was going to be misunderstood by many people, that I was going to have pastors walking down the street towards me, cross the street, because they were uncomfortable about how they would speak to me. And that was not fun for a couple of years, I admit. But it's okay, because what God has blessed us with has been just the most amazing adventure, and we're so grateful for the way that he's holding our hand through it all. It is better on the other side of that uncomfortableness, but it does take a lot of faith, probably the biggest step in our faith journey.
Definitely a lot of Justin Coe's preaching helped push me over the edge. Somebody who was heavily involved in Bible work and ministerial kind of work, who stepped out of that and got into media, into a YouTube channel, into other ways of ministering. So certainly, if somebody's looking for resources, I'd encourage you to search for some of his sermons and talks at church events. Wes, one of the most compelling pieces of film that of yours that I have seen, you did fairly early, and I want you to talk a little bit about it, not to spoil it or to give it away, but what we'll do is we'll actually link to this video in the description of this YouTube video so people can go down and watch it. But I just want you to tell us a little bit about the concept of the story behind the the film that I think you first played at your father's funeral, because that was one that that rocked my socks. It really made and stopped me think about that generational passing on of this mission. So maybe just give us a little bit about that film and that story, if you can, and then we'll link to that with the intention, with the purpose of hopefully inspiring some people.
Hey, so and this is. Let me just talk to the creatives, the beginning filmmakers out there for a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the two most hacked jobs of all the films that I've released are the ones that have had multi-million views each. The one of Dad and the one of my son and his bees, Finn's honey.
And the reason you say that then is because it's not the super polished things that have the most impact. Sometimes it's the rough jobs, and it's often the story behind the video.
Story is everything.
Itself.
Content is king, and authentic stories are so needed in this world. People being honest about the way God is leading them and changing their lives and the world. So that story began with my dad being born in Tonga to a missionary family. His father worked at Beulah College in Tonga, and Dad, of course, then went into pastoral ministry and leadership all his life, and only ever got back to Tonga once, about 35, 40 years ago. And then by the leading of God and a friend that we knew, we got invited to go and photograph the Tongan royal family. And I said to Dad, and we had a very short window of time. We had to fly in like 2 days. It was a rush job. And like, Dad, you've got to come. And I'm going to bring two of our kids that are old enough to come with me, our two boys, and I want you to come and tell all the stories of when you were a boy in Tonga. And eventually he agreed, and Mum came as well. And it coincided in God's great plan with the timing of an evangelistic effort that was just finishing, with Tongan pastors that for the first time had all come back to Tonga from all around the world. And they were gathering in Nuku'alofa for a couple of days of meetings. And we arrived about 1 a.m. that night before the first meeting. And they asked Dad, come and take the first meeting for us. So we turned up bleary-eyed, and for some reason I just thought, I'm just going to film. I filmed, on the plane, meeting Mum and Dad at the airport, and the boys in the plane, and then I filmed this sermon that Dad preached to the, it was only 20 or so people in the room, and he talked about his journey and his missionary mum and dad, and his dad's first wife had buried his dad had buried his first wife, who died of Spanish influenza. They got married, sailed on a boat to Tonga, and within a couple of years, he was burying her under a coconut tree at Wharaeroa. And then he brought his next wife back, and that's my grandma, back to Tonga. It's such sacrifice, this generation, such amazing sense of mission. And so it was just wonderful listening to Dad talk with these people and talk of this history, and calling them to well, I won't tell all the story, of course. You might watch it, but after photographing the royal family later the next day, and we went out to a beach, which I found out was the very beach that Dad's father arrived in Tonga with his bride to, right there. And we went there and snorkeling and had dinner on the beach, and that was our last meal. Dad got a brain bleed that night, fell down the stairs, and medevaced out to New Zealand and passed away there. So, but very tough time. But what a beautiful bookending of his life that God gave him. He was like a little kid again in Tonga. As a very shy man, actually, even though in leadership. But here he is talking to these big burly guys in Tonga on the streets in Nuku'alofa, and a really, really special time that God gave as a gift to him. And we were all together for that last final moment, and then passing on of that final message and his favorite text, Matthew 28, 19 and 20. Go ye into all the world. So that was the story there that it was a really, really special time for us.
Yeah. And I guess obviously then just to add context, the first time, I don't know if that's the first time you showed that video ever. I think it was at the funeral there at Memorial Church.
Yeah.
Where you were tasked with the giving the sermon for that service. And you actually just spoke for a very short time, and then you said, Dad would have liked to have had the last word anyway, and here it is. And for you to have actually been there and recorded his last sermon as well, and then for him to be able to give such an evangelistic message to a room full of people who were there to honor his life. Oh boy, I get teary just thinking about it, man. And so we'll put that video in the link below, and encourage people to watch it, because story is important, and story changes everything. And we've been part of one of the best stories ever told that's been repeated time and time again by Hollywood, but never quite matched. And there is an important job for each of us to do in ministry, and it's not going to be storytelling, it's not going to be film, it's not going to be photography for everybody, but it's going to be something. And this is just a good reminder for me to not minimize somebody else's form of ministry, and to not be so blind as to realize, that everybody has a role to play in this church, and it is important, and everybody should be encouraged and inspired to do it better and to do more of it, and to be a blessing along the way. So yeah, Wes, thanks for your courage and in following your calling, and pray that God continues to bless you in that ministry. Any last words from you for the digital missionaries out there watching this one?
I think you've said it really well, mate, but I just maybe add, whenever you're feeling a little bit nervous, just remember that's last days, and it's going to take courage from those who have been given the great privilege of being here for the last moments of Earth's history to stand up and be on the front line. So if you're needing a little bit of courage, somebody, put your faith in God, and he will give you the courage that is required to do what he's calling you to do.
Amen. Thanks for your time, Wes. We'll leave it there.